Good evening and welcome to the 5-8, where we discuss each of the week's 5 most fucked up topics for 8 minutes. 5 topics, 8 minutes, usually 2 hosts, but tonight I'm doing this solo. Usually 1 guest. Tonight we have 4, some singing, a lot of curse words, and as many cocktails as we deem necessary. Hello, all of you. Usually I say, hello, hey, LB, how are you doing? But LB is not here, as you can see. She has the week off this week. I have the week off next week. So rather than have a co-host, I decided I'm just going to get more guests because it's more fun that way. We're going to have, this is going to be a great episode and a one we haven't tried before. So I'm excited for it. The sort of overall arcing theme of the episode is USAID and what happens after the implosion of it, thanks to Trump and Elon Musk and all that. We have on hand, not 1, not 2, not 3, but 4 former diplomats who worked at USAID. So we're going to have them come on and talk about all manner of things, as you can see by the ticker. So, if you want to see LB and me talking, we did that on Tuesday, actually, on my Substack, on my Prevail Substack. We had a basically show-length episode about all things Jeffrey Epstein. And then I did another Jeffrey Epstein thing, I guess, this morning. So I'm not going to talk about that guy anymore because I'm tired of him. And I think everybody watching this knows exactly who he is and what happened. And there's really not much more to discuss. Someone wants to know what I'm drinking, and it is a Manhattan, which is what I usually drink, although I haven't had one in a while. So anyway, I want to get started. I don't want to keep our guests waiting. So I guess I'll start the timer, although I'm not going to go 8 minutes on this. Let's see. Hit the timer button, and here we go. All right, the first topic is Up, Up, and Away, by which I mean I went to see the Superman movie yesterday. I took a half day from work, and at 4:15 in the afternoon, I went and I bought one of these reclining seat things that they have now. So you don't really near anybody. It's almost like you're elevating above things. And in a pretty crowded theater, I must say, I watched the Superman movie. So they started showing the trailer for the Superman movie months ago while I was watching the NBA Finals. And I saw it and I was like, why? Why are we doing this? Why do we need do we really need another Superman movie? Didn't we just do this, And I was like, it doesn't even look good. Like the effects and I didn't like any of it. And I thought to myself, well, this is just going to fall away. And then, like, if you've observed on social media, the movie's been trending since it released last week or whatever, right? And the reason why is the MAGA people don't like the Superman movie in the same way that they didn't like the Barbie movie, like the Superman movie. I mean, what are 2 more American, kind of stereotypically American things than Barbie and Superman? But MAGA, that's supposed to make America great, doesn't want anything to do with those 2 things somehow. So I thought, all right, I have to at least see the damn movie because MAGA doesn't like it. How bad can it be? And I had heard that, there's stuff in there about they push that he's an immigrant and because he's literally an alien from space. And they, that there's supposed to be ICE in there and detention centers that the MAGA was all worked up about. And Lex Luthor is not, back in the 80s, in 1980, when Gene Hackman, rest in peace, played Lex Luthor, he was sort of this comic figure. And because it didn't make any sense, really. It's this bald guy who's really smart. And he's going to do these things. And we're like, yeah, I don't know. Now it makes sense. Now we get that there's a guy that's really rich and really tech savvy and has his fingers in a lot of different pies and is insecure about his receding hairline. So he gets hair plugs. We know who this guy is, right? It's something that's there. So Lex Luthor front and center. But the point here is that the MAGA people are upset because they think that the movie is depicting an ICE detention center, right? there's a scene where and I'm not going to give any spoilers here. They all have the same sort of arc, these movies. Superman gets taken, whatever, and he's brought to this super duper prison to hold him, which, if you're familiar at all with comic books, is something that happens. The superhero has got taken to a weird secret prison. It happened in Superman 2 with Zod and those guys, right? That's like the flapping thing in space. So MAGA sees this and they're like, that's El Salvador. That's Guantanamo. They're talking about Seacoast there or whatever. Not realizing that like the movie was shot like a year and a half ago before any of this stuff even started happening. So the funny thing is, like, if you are watching that and you're identifying your own political movement in something that's happening in this movie, it's not based on what you're doing. You're basing yourself on literal comic book villains. So we have a nation run by comic book villains. That's one thing, which is it's kind of funny. It's not really funny. It's awful. But the main thing I wanted to say is that I knew I would go in there and kind of enjoy it. And I was like blown away by how much I liked this movie. It was so good. I cannot, everybody just go see it, because even if you don't like that kind of thing, you don't have to know anything about anything. You don't have to worry about, Marvel has all this, like, if you haven't seen the first 16 Avengers movies, I don't know why Hawk whatever is doing this stuff. I can't get into any of that. I don't care. Everybody knows Superman, there's Lois Lane, there's Lex Luthor. That's all you need to know, right? And it's great. It's like, it's exactly of the moment. It's a perfect movie for right now. And I don't want to reveal anything beyond that, but like, I don't even like Superman that much. It's not I'm a Batman guy, right? But I left the thing and I was laughing at times. I was crying at times. Like every note of it was perfect. It was like just the right balance of funny and serious and campy and comic book and real. James Gunn did a terrific job. There's fun, like little cameos in it. But mostly I looked on social media, and this is not just me. It made me happy to watch it. I literally left like glowing. Like I felt, when Superman and Lois are like embracing and they're like going up because he can fly. That's how I felt leaving the theater. And I've been on this bubble of that since then. So, again, it's a silly movie. It's a kid's movie. But I enjoyed the hell out of it. I'm going to write about it on Sunday and give more thoughts. But if you're bored, if you want to just go sit in the air conditioning for 2 hours, by the way, it's 2 hours. It's not one of these 3.5 hour slog fests that Marvel makes you sit through. 15 minutes into the movie, they mentioned Superman's bladder, and I immediately thought, oh God, I got to pee now. And that, so 3.5, I can't do that. That's the perfect movie length. And thematically, it's just great. It's just everything about the country that we love and that we want and that we hope for and strive for is there. And the sort of the contrast between basically Superman and Lex Luthor, but what they represent is so of the moment. It couldn't be more of the moment. And, and I don't think I'm going to give any spoilers away here, but it feels really fucking good to watch the bad guys get it in the end, because in real life, it's not happening fast enough. If it ended in 2 hours, it would be much, much better. So anyway, that's what I got. I think everybody should go see the Superman movie. And that's what I have now. Right. See, now what we're going to do is I'm not talking for two topics, right? So what we're going to do is, usually, for those of you new to the show here, what we do is we have two sort of monologue-ish intro. Then we have the media, and then we have the guests come on. But I'm just going to do the media right now. And this isn't even a new one, and it doesn't matter, because this guy has been in the news, and we have to resuscitate this. And when that's over, I'm going to bring out our guests. It's going to be great. Okay.
Capturing the course, a guy who's an eminence of grace, custom tailored suits like the penguin at Jones Day. Move away from the left, tip hard to the right. He is the secret SCOTUS guy. And he got 1.6 billion from that asshole Barry side.
Entertainment that's really corrupting our youth.
He's Leonard Leo if you're female, trans, or gay. He spends stark millions just to strip your rights away. He owns 6 justices and they all vote his way. He's Leonard Leo, Knight of Malta Opus Dei.
I spent close to 30 years of helping to build the conservative legal reform.
All right, Leonard Leo. And really, that's who he is. You could just sing the damn Duran Duran song and explain very succinctly who this asshole is. And he is almost directly responsible for just about everything wrong with the country right now. I mean, you know, unobjectively, it's just true. So, okay, I'm going to bring out our guest now. And one of the fun things and sort of random things is that they're all in the same place. I'm not going to say where they are, but they're all together, but on 2 different computers. So we're gonna bring them out. First of all, let's bring out Michelle and Robbie. Hey guys. So Robbie Harris, for people who have listened to my podcast, has been on my podcast before. Now it's like a year and a half, 2 years ago. The time is just crazy. Robbie is the managing director of AMEA, and she's lived and worked in places like Syria, West Africa, Niger, Central America, and she has obviously worked for USAID as a senior transition advisor. Michelle Girard, people watching this show know from the comment section. This is where the part where we bring you in from the comment section to here. She's also worked for USAID with a focus on oh god, I can't read my writing. Integration. Oh, you're gonna have to say it, Michelle. I can't read it. But her focus is on the Middle East, Central Asia, countering violent extremism and stabilization. And yeah. Okay. So welcome, guys. And now let's bring on Erica and Sara. Hi, guys. Okay. So Erica Kaster, also USAID, from the Office of Transition Initiatives, OTI, State Department, U.S. Army Joint Readiness Center, and the COO, of Arctic Fox. And you have lived and worked Afghanistan, Belarus, Libya, Ethiopia, Sudan, among other places. And finally, Sara Yim, the COO of Weavery.ai. I think I said it right. And you've have 15 years of experience at USAID, also experience with peacebuilding, countering violent extremism, etc. Okay, that's the longest intro I've ever done. Welcome, guys. How are you? That's the first question is, how are you? Are you able to have fun despite the world falling apart? Is everything okay?
Having fun's a form of resistance, Greg. Maintain your joy. Sojourner
right.
Truth said something along those lines. And we are all sitting by the sea, enjoying ourselves while working immensely. But yeah, having a great time and talking to you and all your guests.
Okay, good. Well, you want to get started on is everybody else okay? Should we go around and make sure all right. The nods indicate that everybody is okay. So that's good. All right, so I'm going to hit the timer for the first topic, which is the title of the episode, which is American Exodus. One of the first things that Trump did when he came in and gave the keys to the car to Elon Musk with his chainsaw, who went and even when I try to say this out loud, it sounds like something from the Superman movie that Lex Luthor would do, that he basically went in there and used AI and other things to decide to take aim at USAID and effectively implode it and shut it down. So I think people don't necessarily understand or know even what USAID is or was before this happened, and how important it is to the United States and our ability to exercise soft power around the globe. So, Michelle, let's start with you. What are the ramifications of this happening? Like things that are obvious and things that people might not know. And you start, and then everybody else can jump in at will.
It's a big question, and I'm thrilled to be on this side of the screen. I want to say hello to everyone in the comment section because I've been a commenter and I love the community. So big shout out to everyone who is watching and participating and creating this amazing community. And Greg, thanks for pulling us all together. What I really like to say is what USA did was make diplomacy tangible, right? And so diplomacy is often a very verbal negotiations, discussions, agreements, all of that. But on the ground, USAID is actually implementing U.S. values, U.S. foreign policy, and we are supporting peacebuilding. We're supporting countering violent extremism. We're stabilizing countries. We're making sure that people have the healthcare that they need, that they have the opportunities for economic development, for employment. That the range of what we do is pretty vast, and we happen to be specialists in the conflict, peace building, and stabilization field. Which I think is really important. What USAID does, many people don't see because of the good work that's happening. It's not coming back and hitting U.S. shores.
I would also say it gave us a seat at the table at many tables. And from my work in West Africa and other places, what we're seeing now is that the Russians and Chinese are stepping in to take our places, both in terms of security service provision, in terms of infrastructure development. And that then leads to, so for instance, right now, China owns and runs, I think, 9 of the top 10 ports in all of the world. So they basically control international shipping at this point. And they're continuing to invest in deep water ports, other types of infrastructure in these countries, and gaining a foothold in exchange for what they're providing. That then gives them power at the UN. And I think what people are forgetting is we used to be a unipolar world, and the US was at the top of this. And whether or not we had soft power, we could still control things. But that's not the situation anymore. And so we need these soft power tools to enable us to have influence, and because we can't muscle our way through on our own anymore. And I'd like to just ask Erica and Sara if you guys have some things to say, because you all had some slightly different experiences as well. So.
Well, I'll just start and mention, in addition to everything that they just talked about, a lot of people in the United States don't know that USAID and broader foreign assistance. USAID is one and kind of the biggest foreign assistance organization for USG, but other parts of the government do foreign assistance, and a lot of that has also been cut off at other agencies and departments. But we worked in partnership with US businesses. And so something that surprised a lot of people, especially out in the breadbasket of the United States, is how many crops and how many products actually were purchased from US producers and shipped overseas in support of a lot of the humanitarian and food aid, especially kind of causes. But then additionally, there were, a number of companies that partnered with USAID or with other parts of the government to, improve cocoa production in I don't know, Ethiopia. That might not be the right country, but you kind of get the idea. Or agricultural inputs, or manufacturing tools, that kind of stuff. So like what Robbie was talking about as USAID being a tool of influence abroad and building those relationships so that we continue to have good relationships. The United States continues to have good relationships with countries that are really important to our long-term security and economic prosperity. That a lot of that was kind of an undercurrent that wasn't talked about a whole lot. The good that it does for domestic populations in the U.S. hand it over to Sara to add.
I would say the key word here is relationships. USAID really provided the backbone for building relationships at a level that you wouldn't imagine. At the local level, at the subnational level, at the national level, these are all relationships that now have been collapsed, right? And what comes after that? You know, when we come in for those relationships, it's to do good deeds. It's to build off of this sort of public work sort of, you know, backbone. And if you don't have anything like that, what are the relationships now that will materialize and manifest moving forward? Is it more on the military side? Is it more just about commerce and business? Is there anything that's really going to be about doing good in the world? And that is actually a force to be reckoned with. You know, what are we all sort of like trying to build towards? You know, at the end of the day, humanity and humans, we need purpose, and we need to feel like we want to do good in the world as well. And so I think that there's a part here that's sort of missing, is that we're going to miss a global goal for ourselves, for humanity as well, with the collapse of an entity like USAID, which was actually one of the bigger donor entities around the world.
Great.
Could I respond to one of the people in the comments?
Sure.
Greg? I don't know.
Yeah.
Someone asked how we get voters to care about this. And, you know, for us, the humanitarian aspect and saving lives is super important. But maybe for some Americans who feel like their lives are really awful and they wish they could get similar assistance in the U.S. and don't feel like they're being helped and they're angry about it, I think the focus in that point is something Erica mentioned, and it's actually the billions of dollars that come back to U.S. Most of the money that USAID spent actually was spent in the U.S. to buy food, to buy medicine, to buy these things that is now no longer being spent. So even though the support was shipped overseas, it actually was supporting U.S. businesses. And there's some projects going on that talk about to voters, actually, how this investment, how many jobs it supports, what that looks like, and how many communities it supports. But their entire farming communities in North Carolina and in the Midwest who have lost massive $1 million contracts. They'd already bought the seeds. They have nowhere to ship the food. It was designed to be shipped overseas. And so now these farmers stand to possibly lose their farms.
Yeah.
I wanted to, I mean, these are all really critical points. I also, just to add, universities played a pretty big role in the USAID world. There were a lot of partnerships with USAID that supported with research on the projects that we were doing, in the innovation of what we were doing, and really bringing solid evidence-based academic rigor to the work that we were doing. I want to go back to a point that Robbie and Sara and that everyone made about relationships, security, political aspects of USAID work, particularly in conflict and peace building sector. We know that most conflicts don't have only a military solution, that most of them are resolved by political negotiation or political solution. And back during in Afghanistan, development was really elevated to the three legs of the stool of development, diplomacy, and defense. And a lot of our defense colleagues were the first and very vocal to say that there is no security solution, there is no military solution to these conflicts, and the important role that USAID played, particularly on the ground at the grassroots, building consensus around peace, around ending war, around coming together in a negotiated agreement of how they were going to move forward. And really, I started in development before 2001, and after 2001, when the war on terror started, I think the nature of development changed pretty significantly over the 20 years of that war on terror. But we played a massive role in Afghanistan and the Middle East, and really rebuilding positive relationships in Afghanistan or in the Middle East, where we did have wars, where communities were destroyed, and there was a lot of mistrust with the United States. And so I think that's really an important part in a role of what USAID does. We are really the visible face of the goodness of America and the goodness of American taxpayers. And people recognize that, and people definitely could separate the difference between what the American people care about and what the American government policies were.
Yeah, these are all excellent points. I mean, and we were talking before we in the production meeting about like sometimes you don't realize what you have until it's gone, kind of thing. So some of the work that's being done, the people that are like bottom line oriented, you know, when for example we just burn lots of food instead of giving to people, when people are starving, they leave where they are to go to other countries and disrupt stuff that way. When we don't send medicine, people get sick and pandemics start. And we have a whale beheading weirdo in charge of our health services right now. It's probably not a good idea. So it's not like it's all of the saving the world stuff, which again, Superman movie, guys. You guys just go see the Superman movie. But it's also there's practical political good stuff that comes out of it too. And killing it was just catastrophically stupid in my opinion. So okay, I want to move to the next topic now, which I call failed states. Now, I want to kind of look at the U.S. a little bit. Robbie, when you were on my podcast, however long ago that was, you said something which I put in my book because it was jarring. I think I asked you, you know, what does it look like when it really there's an overthrow and the government becomes not the government that we're used to? And you said, kiss March Madness and the Super Bowl goodbye. Those things don't happen in the middle of a civil war. Your Starbucks is gone and your Walmart is gone and your gas under $5 a gallon is gone. And then later you said, when I asked how it would affect like daily life, you said it would affect your ability to walk outside of your house, get in your car, drive down the street and pick up your McDonald's, your Chick-fil-A, your Starbucks, whatever it is you want in the morning with nobody harassing you, not having to go through armed checkpoints, not having to pay off someone at a checkpoint, not wondering if they're going to shoot your daughter, your son, and knowing that you'll get there and be able to purchase what you want and come home safely, which are all things that, frankly, we take for granted here. So, you know, looking at that, what I'm curious about now, that was a year and a half ago. And I don't know if you know, but there's a new president now that we've had for about 6 months. And things are not so great here. And what I want, what I'm curious about, you've all lived in different countries, you know, which have various forms of government. Some are democracies, some aren't, some are established, a lot of them aren't, some are more dictatorship-y. So you've seen things that certainly I haven't seen and people watching this haven't seen. So when you look now with your perspective, your sort of global perspective at what's happening, what are things that you're seeing that you maybe saw in another country that you're seeing here that are giving you cause for alarm? So, Erica, let's start with you this time.
I mean, I think for me, the attacks on civil society and on the media here, I mean, I think that's very basic and pretty common in a lot of places where you either see democratic backsliding or you already have a full-fledged authoritarian state, right? The lawsuits against media who put out information that is disagreeable to the administration or to people in the administration, that kind of a thing. I'm going to hand over to Sarah because I can actually hear feedback downstairs. Will you guys turn your volume down the tiniest bit? We're in the same building and it's really throwing me off.
Well, I'll just add that I think it's the constant whiplashing that you feel, where your attention is going from one to the next issue, one after another. And a part of that is a distraction campaign, so that you're not focusing on actually the unraveling of the institution or the desecration of our Constitution from that direction and that direction. And so you're constantly being distracted. And so that's one. And obviously the other is the fear, the intentional level of fear that they're driving into our population right now in our psyche, is definitely two examples from my perspective.
I'm going to pick up where I left off because I've retained my ability to think, and at the same time, but I think the thing that what I was going at with civil society, right? Attacks on civil society in particular, it started with attacks on on USAID first domino to fall. But what I think we are seeing now is harassment, for example, of organizations that are doing immigration work, and we will probably see further harassment or threats to look into the books and look so one of the things that a lot of organizations here in the United States who have in general maybe have to protect themselves over the last years and decades from people who might not agree with what they're doing, might have other politics. Like it can be a whole different game here, right? Where people are coming to try to look through your files or trying to get information about the people who you're working with, where you're getting your money, where is your money stored, that kind of stuff. That is my concern because it has a huge chilling effect. Obviously, already there are organizations and individuals who otherwise might be more forward leaning against kind of creeping autocracy, but they're holding back because they're worried about being singled out and targeted with that kind of harassment or potentially a lawsuit, that kind of et cetera. So I think we could see a slide in that direction very quickly, more so, and people need to just kind of start getting ready.
Yeah, like for example, firing Stephen Colbert would be a good example of a big corporation just bending the knee to the dictator. I think. Okay, let's go to Michelle and Robbie. What do you guys think?
For me, there's a institution in the Middle East called the Mukhabarat, and they're basically internal surveillance. And with them is the so they have it when they talk about their Ministry of Interior, they're talking about their internal security forces, not someone who's managing their national parks. And what I see with the rise of ICE and what I see with kind of what's going on with the proposed objectives of Palantir, and kind of we're creating this surveillance and police monitored state that thrives on division. And this is another thing, right? In almost every society I've been in that has been ruled by an autocracy or rising authoritarianism or coming in at the back end of it, what we've seen is the way that they control people is one by this increased surveillance and police state, but it thrives on creating division because then you're pulling people apart. They can't pull together to resist because you're going after some. And even if someone wants to help, they're terrified. So they're running and hiding somewhere else. And they're pitting people against each other because the only people who end up winning in that instance, it's not the people who are quote unquote right and are on the right side of history. It's the people who created the division in the first place, because what they succeeded in doing is dividing society so much that there is no way to create a center or something that is strong enough that holds together enough to be able to push back. And I'm seeing this more and more. It's not just ICE. It's not just. There's ICE, the online surveillance, the militarization of our police officers, and I don't support defunding the police, but I think there is a very different role for police versus the military, moving the military in to take care of civilian issues. These are all scare tactics, but they're also tactics that have been used in other places, and it's not new.
Yeah.
I mean, so many great points. I would add the courts are of a concern when we start manipulating the courts. Or politicizing the courts. Greg, your show has done so much to highlight what has been happening, not just in the Supreme Court, but other levels of the courts. Identity politics, of course, I think is always the first step of what we see happening, right? Because once politics becomes around cults of personality rather than issues and values, that really begins to start the fracturing and the polarization. around different issues and scapegoating. So I watched with just fascination, and not the good type, of course, as this bloodlust of people, that, the bloodlust around federal workers.
Mm.
I mean, federal workers who are, following what the policy is or what the regulations are. And all of a sudden, it was like people coming after federal workers as if they are the ones who are to blame for their economic situation, or for not having an opportunity, or any number of issues. That and of course immigrants and illegal immigrants particularly. And as Sara mentioned, this huge distraction from really why are you in the situation you're in? Is it really this federal worker who is making sure that your Social Security check is mailed?
Yeah.
Or is it elite capture of power and resources? And, by the way, I know the alarm went off, but I do just want to say that this argument of cutting foreign assistance so that assistance can go to Americans is not new. It's not new. It's been a point that's happened, over the 20 plus years that I have been working in foreign assistance. The issue is any money that's cut generally never goes back into social services for Americans. It is usually, all of a sudden the defense budget is bigger, or in this case, it's defense and ICE, or, we see all of these cuts that people said were going to be made in order to actually make America and Americans more prosperous. And yet at the same time, all of these social services are being cut as well. And so, but everything is very emotional, and messaging is around emotions and not around logic. But I've never seen really a situation in which reducing foreign assistance has ever resulted in increasing of spending for social services.
Yeah. And you're probably not going to now. But I've done work on the Dark Enlightenment and all these guys like Curtis Yarvin, who's their sort of like thought leader, dorky guy with the hair, came up with the acronym RAGE, which stands for Retire All Government Employees. And, a lot of these people, they that's all they can remember is one syllable words like build the wall, and I think they sort of glommed onto that. And bureaucracy, the name bureaucracy sounds like something negative, but the reality is that that's how everything functions. And they're taking away very intentionally the ability for the government to function, which is very, very dangerous. And it kind of leads us into the next topic, which we could spend a little more time on, which is, the whole, we were talking before the show started about the whole idea of democracy. Like there's now, I mentioned Yarvin, there's now a whole movement of people that are very powerful, even though there are fringe weirdos. They're somehow now in position of great power and influence in the current Trump administration. Mostly, I think, because anybody that isn't a weirdo won't work for the guy. So he's forced to hire either sycophants, crooks, or these people who have very strange right-wing agendas. And they've made the case for the Red Caesar and the, we should have a king and all this kind of stuff. Apparently not having read the Declaration of Independence, I don't know, or understand the history of our country or anything, but that seems to be the direction that we're headed in right now. Certainly with, Trump is trying to consolidate his power and is very much on the Hitler trajectory in terms of where, what he's trying to do. As I'm not the first person to point out, but let's talk a little bit because we, this was brought up beforehand. I thought it was really interesting. The whole idea of like, what is democracy anyway? Because it means different things to different people. And, do we want it? Is it good? Why don't people want it? What does it mean to different people? And Sara, when we were talking before, you brought up a really interesting point that people tend to conflate democracy and capitalism, which are not the same thing. So let's start with you on this topic, because I want you to talk a little bit about that, because I think that's an interesting distinction to make.
Yeah, I think oftentimes people conflate the two, right? Democracy and capitalism represent who we are here in America. But capitalism is really, at the end of the day, an economic system. And I think that because of the conflation between the two and because now people are feeling that their pockets are tighter than it once was, and that they see the system, the capitalistic system, not necessarily working for them. I think that the conflation here is that then democracy is not working for you. And some would argue that's probably also accurate, right? It's not working for you because you're not democratically represented well enough to be works, because this capitalistic system isn't working, right? And your representatives are not representing you properly. And so there is that intersection. But where we are, I think, is that capitalism is a system where we all recognize the wealth inequality is outrageous, right? We know that trickle-down theory hasn't worked for 50 years, and now we're finally really feeling that. And so I think that for me, that separation is critical, because I think that we can reform our capitalistic system. We can reform with greater policies, with real representation, with democratic representation, right? We can reform these things. It's just that right now, I think with corruption in our country, and I think that when we talked about that a little bit as well, is that when I work overseas, we often talk about how there's so much corruption that gets in the way of progress and real governance and stability in these countries. But we don't talk about the corruption in America because it's codified into law, right? We have so many, Citizens United, campaign finance rules that codify these things that make it seem like it's legal. But at the end of the day, these are financial transactions that are not working in our favor. And so for me, the separation and the conversation of democracy and capitalism should be separate, because right now we're about to topple democracy because we don't like capitalism.
Yeah. And the people on top of the pyramid want more stock prices to go up. Yeah, it's precarious. You also said while we were that it was very much like real democracy is very much like an HOA at the the condo association, which HOAs are weird and nobody really wants to go to the meetings and it's a lot of work and you don't get paid. But that's how the building is run, and if you don't have good people doing the jobs, where are you? So, anyway, yeah. Erica, what are your thoughts?
I think that, I would. So I've heard somebody else in the United States recently talk about how a lot of Americans might be falling into the trap of just thinking if we have elections, that's a democracy. Like if the elections happen, that's a democracy. It's not about all the other stuff that goes on the rest of the year and your ability to participate in it and your ability to make a difference and communicate what you want through your representative. And, I'm also just kind of thinking about some of the places that I have worked. We've worked overseas. I was fortunate enough to be, on the front lines when the Libyan revolution broke out in 2011. I arrived in Libya a few months after that, before the whole country had yet been liberated. And, I know that the country's had a whole lot of struggles since then. It's not exactly a beacon of democratic success. And there are a lot of reasons for that. And that's a whole other show. But, what was so striking to me then was that kind of their concept of democracy, right? So I started out in eastern Libya, and the people there were so excited, especially for Americans to be on the ground, because they thought of us as knowing basically they weren't looking for our money, they were looking for our advice. They thought of us as the people who know how to set up civil society organizations and independent media, and kind of just how does this all work together, this constellation of kind of, new independent entities and individuals that now suddenly have the right to be able to express themselves and advocate for themselves or advocate for their communities, et cetera. And so, in some ways, it's really kind of striking that I think, they had a very keen, although, somewhat like and I don't want to be, categorical here. Obviously, there are a lot of Libyans who are well studied on how democracies work and such. But, there are a lot of folks who had never lived in a democracy there and were very excited to exercise, kind of just like new freedoms that they didn't have before. And I don't know that people in the States kind of are recognizing that the erosion of those freedoms it is erosion of democracy, especially when we see people being attacked and for things that are, unlawful.
Yeah. Oh my goodness. Yeah. Michelle and Robbie, let's go to you.
I think one thing that strikes me, we speak with Sara a lot about this idea of capitalism and democracy. And when we talk about democracy, I often hear people say, oh, well, the Constitution, oh, the rule of law. And going back to your Superman movie, the Constitution is not a superhero that's going to sprout a cape and fly down and save America, right? The Constitution is a document, and democracy is not a sport. It's not a spectator sport. It requires involvement all the time from people. And most Americans don't realize this. They don't even know that institutions are part of their democracy. Most Americans don't even understand that the interstates are supported by government institutions, which in turn is supported by democratic principles. And so it's really interesting to see people arguing against themselves, and even people who want to see things be different than what this current administration is bringing. They're like, oh, well, Constitution, rule of law. I don't know if anybody's seen the movie. I think it's Conspiracy with Kenneth Branagh. It's about the Holocaust. It takes place in one room. The Holocaust was legal.
Yep.
There's everything under the rule of law. It's not about the rule of law. It's what those rules are, and it's how those laws are shaped, and it's the values behind it. And we really have to consider ourselves as a nation, what's important to us and how we want to move those things forward. But it is going to take involvement. We were talking earlier, and Sara mentioned the disparity. I was doing some research for things that I was working on actually with Erica, and I think I discovered that roughly 27% of Americans are on Medicaid. And in South Carolina, I know the requirements are different in every state, but in South Carolina, you have to have 3 children and make under $17,400 a year to qualify for Medicaid. And if that is the threshold, and we have 27% of Americans on Medicaid in the United States, we have a huge problem that just didn't arrive with this administration. It has been building for 50 years. And that people are begging to be heard. And what MAGA did was he went and said, I hear you. I see you. I'm going to do something about it. I love you. I love you. Yeah. And I'm going to do something about it. Is he? No, he's going to do the exact opposite. But this idea that democracy is somehow going to fix that. And we tell people we've had a democracy and we want to go back to that. So what are you saying? I want to go back to the state the way that things were. And so I don't think that everybody wants the way that things were, because they weren't doing well. Some people were, some people weren't. And so I think we really have to look at the narratives we're talking about and how we talk about these things, because democracy isn't necessarily the thing. We have to really consider how people live and what are we, and I hate to say this, but I work in behavior change. What are we selling? What are we promoting? What are we building?
Yeah.
Sorry, that's a bit of a tangent.
So many points from everyone to build on. I think, and it might be, I might go a little bit on a stream of consciousness, but
that's what we're here for.
Takes the ability for people to genuinely want to sit down and listen to each other and find a way to compromise and to find common ground on common values. And it takes, I think, it takes meaningful leadership to do that as well, and leaders who want to work for the common good. But also it takes participation, right? And it takes awareness. And I see an American population that a lot of people working 2-3 jobs. Where's their time to understand, to look through different information sources? We're flooded with information. We don't know what's true. We don't know what's not true. We have the 2-second sound bites everywhere, or the Instagram posts and clips. And I think democracy, or what we are calling democracy, has become complicated to follow and to understand. And it's not necessarily an issue with democracy itself. It has to do, I think, a lot with, with the rise of social media, the rise of misinformation. It has to do with social isolation, the breakdown of communities, people not knowing their neighbor, people not, the disappearance of third spaces, which I know Sara talks a lot about as well.
Wait, what is that?
They did a really brilliant piece on social isolation as well, and how that is also contributing. Bowling Alone, of course, was written 20 years ago on this topic. So I think it has been sort of something over time, as Robbie has said. And I think we should also acknowledge that there are certain groups in our democracy who have experienced limited democracy, right? I think people's experience of democracy, as we've said, is different, but there are other groups. There are groups, I think, that enjoy more democracy than others. And I think we should acknowledge that in our own country too, understanding that we have this idea that we're always working towards progress and towards making our union more perfect. And our democracy more perfect. But I think we're at an inflection point where we're no longer talking about our values and norms and what we value and what our American values stand for, or at least we are, but it's also tied up with identity politics. And I think rather than talk about the Constitution, we need to be talking more about the social contract.
Yeah.
And, I feel like a lot of the discussions that we all had growing up with around civics is just not there anymore. You don't hear people talk about the social contract here in this country. And that's where we need to really be bringing people together around how do we want to live as Americans? What are our values, and what does that social contract, how do we want to rewrite it?
Yeah. There's a line in Succession where the sort of Elon Musk character played by Skarsgård they're talking about democracy, and he's like, yeah, people couldn't really vote there until like whatever the 50s. So your democracy is about as old as Botswana's. So settle down, he says. And because the point about progress is true. We've tried to make it so that we're more and more representative as we go along, but that's not the structure of the government is not represented. As long as Wyoming has the same number of senators as Texas and California, we're going to be in some kind of trouble. But in terms of the social contract, I think, and you said the idea of compromise is so important. What happened in the country, I think, and you can see what you think about this, is one party decided to stop doing that. Like if you go even in the years before the Civil War, you have the compromise of 1840, whatever, and this compromise and that compromise. When Newt Gingrich got into office and Mitch McConnell, they were like, fuck it, we're not working with them anymore. We're just going to obstruct everything. And when you have one of two political parties that refuses to engage or compromise on anything, they're playing a completely different game, and there's no solution there. Because even in the Superman movie, Superman does not work alone. Even Superman doesn't fly down and save the day by himself. That's the thing. So I don't know.
I think Citizens United has also played a role in the willingness, perhaps, for people to compromise as well.
Oh yeah, totally. Sara, you look like you want to say something.
Well, I actually had I organized community dinners around this topic, and the topic of the social contract came up, and I took a little quick survey around the dinner table for people, and I asked, Does anyone really know what the social contract really means? Because we talk about it a lot overseas, because we want people to understand the relationship with the citizen and the government, and what the government is supposed to do, because the government at the end of the day is a service delivery mechanism for the citizen, right? And so I asked around the dinner table, and I would say a third knew that terminology. And to me, I'm not surprised, right? Because in America, it's not quite clear what our relationship with the government is and what the government is supposed to provide. In Somalia, where I worked, if you ask them what are the top 3 things that the government should be doing for you, they can explain very clearly. It's security, justice, and education. We want to make sure you want to make sure you provide rule of law for us. We want to make sure our kids get education provided by the state. And we want to make sure that we feel secure and safe in our country. What is our social contract with our government? You know, what is that? Do people really understand that? Sure, it's localized. We've decentralized everything. Sure. I don't think an Angelino would know what a social contract is versus a New Yorker, right? We don't have that clarity. And I think that that's what we really need to understand, because we need to understand that so that the government can provide those services to its citizens, because that's actually how we can reconnect and understand that democracy is working for you when the government is actually working for its people.
Yeah, I mean that goes back to the compromise thing too, because that started like Reagan saying that, you know, I'm with the government and I'm here to help and that kind of thing, you know, sort of taking that idea that the government is bad rather than the government is us. And what you said is perfect. It's a delivery mechanism for, like, even in the Middle Ages, under feudalism, the peasants and the serfs knew what the social contract was. The Lord had to protect them from the invasions and stuff like that. It was very clear, very delineated. It was not a great way to live, but at least they knew that. So that's what that made me think of. Would anybody else have anything they'd like to add on this topic? Let me see if I check everything with my notes here. I think we covered all the stuff, because now we'll get into the last topic, and then I'll let you guys go and enjoy your time together. We want to end on an uplifting note, and in talking with you beforehand, and Robbie, in talking with you before last time you were on the podcast, you know, there's this idea of peace building and positive messaging, and, you know, coming together, bridging gaps, and that's something that right now it's not, as you pointed out before we went live, it's not something that's happening right now, because right now everything is antithetical, right? You have, like, we're anti-fascists, right? The opposite of fascist is actually democratic socialist, according to Orwell, but we don't say that. We just say we're anti-fascist. You know, we have to defund ICE. Okay, well, what replaces it? You know, never Trump. Okay, but then who? You know, everything is set up in this sort of negative way, and I think, you know, the idea is to turn it around and make it positive. And so, Robbie, let's start with you, because I know this is your wheelhouse here.
Yeah, I think in order if we're gonna, can you guys turn that down a little bit upstairs? Sorry. If we're going to turn this around, we have to start looking at this as a peace building process. And what I mean by that is, right now, and I understand why I get this way. Like, when people were destroying Teslas, I was getting really excited inside. And then I thought, Robbie, they're destroying people's personal property. You shouldn't be like that. But I was like, you know, and I take a step back. And what we want is, we want to be right, but we're not being heard in our desire to be right. We're making our arguments. We're trying to push things because we want to be right, and we know we're right. And maybe we are, but just because we're right doesn't mean we're heard. And if we were right and had enough people who believed exactly like us, well, we wouldn't be in this position, because there would have been a different outcome in the election. Let's just look at that right there, right? And I mean, when we look at the fact that, you know, I think these are the numbers, something like I think Trump won by 77 million votes or something like that. And we look at that and we say, okay, what's going on here? Are Americans truly horrible? Well, yes, some are. Are they truly extreme? Yes, some are. But okay, let's forget about those for the minute. Let's think about our neighbors who are on the opposite side of the political spectrum of us that we've actually gotten along with for 20, 30, 40 years. And now there's a little bit of a tension. Were they horrible people before? Probably not. Maybe a few, but anyway. But we have to start finding these things that bring us together, and we have to start focusing on what we want to build. And as long as, this is a bit of a tangent, but there is a myth that is over 5,000 years old, and it's of Inanna's descent into the underworld. Anyway, her sister ends up killing her. She ends up on a meat hook, and they send some people, these other small gods, down to get her from the underworld. And the instructions they're given is, when you get down there, the queen of the underworld will be in pain, and you need to tell her, when she says, my stomach hurts, you say, I see your stomach hurts. When she says, my head hurts, you say, oh, I know your head hurts. Go through this with her, and at the end, she will ask you, tell me anything you want, and I will give it to you. We have to start listening. Even if we don't intend to do anything about it, we need to listen, and we need to understand to the people that are not like us, because people need to be heard, and we need to be heard. And what we'll find for sure is that if we tend to be on the left, we'll do a lot more listening than people on the right. But over time, we will come to some sort of understanding. But if we don't find these values that bring us together, because the law protects us to be able to disagree on to what extent, but by and large, Americans are not cruel. We do agree. I mean, when I talk to people who voted for Trump, I come from a very Republican Southern area. They're like, well, they shouldn't be messing with people who are working in kitchens. I didn't vote for that. And I want to say, yes, you did, but I listened, And the truth is, actually, they're horrified by it. But people aren't going to admit that they're wrong. They might admit that they were lied to. And so we are in the position, how much are we willing to put aside our need to be right in order to start doing the peace building that we need to push this in a different direction and create something new, and to articulate actually what it is that we want. And that is not something that sells. And I know, because Sara and I have been working to try to get people to fund a massive nationwide campaign around this, or about rebranding America into something that the majority of Americans could get behind. And nobody wants to do it because it doesn't allow anybody to be right. It doesn't make anybody money, and it doesn't put anybody in power. But what it does do is give us the stability and security we need to move forward, and to allow us to then disagree, because you can't disagree and get more of what you want while there's open conflict. Because like I said in your previous thing, you'll be worried if the 16-year-old on the corner has his finger on the trigger and is going to shoot you. I mean, So sorry, I get excited.
No, that's great. And I like that.
Worried about that, but it's different. Will you be canceled? Will you be doxxed? Will you be this?
Yeah.
Will you be that? And we know that happens. And I think that to Robbie's point, there's a lot of discussion around dismantling, which I have, I have a funny relationship with the word, because no one's talking about what they want to build in its place, right? And I think when you're focused on the negative rather than the positive, right, I think we need to flip that and focus on more the positive of what we want to build, rather than investing more in the negative. Not to pay attention to the negative that's happening, and not to try and stop the negative that is happening, because that obviously is a huge concern. Right. But at the same time, there needs to be parallel processes of people talking about what we want to build in place, and the type of community we want to build, and the type of relationships that we want to build with each other, which gets back to the other issues of social isolation, of the breakdown of communities and third spaces, and how are we rebuilding those? Because when you come together as a community and you start to humanize each other, and you start to find common ground and understand each other in a different way, you can find these solutions. And someone in the comment section said, there are a lot of terrible compromises as well. And I would say, yeah, there are compromises that maybe are not very positive, right? Maybe they're compromises that we think are terrible. But I would say what is the compromise based on whose interest? Is it on the public goods interest, or is it on a political party's interest? I mean, that matters. Like, the values and interests behind the compromise is really important. And when you have people coming together and finding sort of common values, and you're making those compromises around what people are coming together on and saying, this is what we want together, I think that's a different type of compromise, rather than compromising in a way so that your party gets as much as you can, right? And so and the other thing I would say is that the issues are very big, and I think they're very overwhelming. And overwhelm can look a lot like apathy, or it can look a lot like the freeze response, where I think a lot of people are saying, are concerned about the lack of activism that might be happening, or the lack of concern that might be happening. And there is some of that. And I think there is a lot of people who are overwhelmed because they see these big issues like ICE, and they say, how do I stop that? Because not everyone is living in an area where maybe they can directly intervene into something that might be happening. And so they said, well, I've called my representative. That's the first thing, and very important. Maybe you're donating to an organization, but I would say really get involved locally. There are so many, things that you can do. Pull up your city council meeting schedule, start attending meetings of your city council, start going to school board meetings, regardless of whether you have children or not. I mean, these are the places where, where the meeting ground of the community happens, and where you are on the front line as well of making sure the values and building the community that you want to see. Because when communities are polarized and fractured, that is that is where manipulation can happen very easily. That is where self-interest happens, and your group, in terms of who you feel safe with, becomes smaller and smaller. So I think really doing as much as you can at the local level. Go to some of your state government hearings. Local government is really important, particularly as more things devolve to state rights.
Yeah. I think you're right. That one of the points there that we have this tendency about the idea of being right, is definitely prevalent. And there is a tendency also to group all Trump voters or MAGA into one sort of and there are obviously lots of different kinds of people that are in there, and they're not all bad people, even though they voted for one of the worst people that ever drew breath. That, there's reasons for that we don't have to get into. And if we're ever going to come together, we have to be able to absolve people from having made this terrible mistake and not give them a hard time about it. Because if we, the last thing anybody wants to hear when they're admitting that they're wrong is gloating, like, we told you, nobody needs that. So I think thinking about it in this way is really useful. Also, that story, Robbie, that you told about the hook, that actually is the plot of the Superman movie. It's not really anyway, no, but I'm just kidding. It could be like he would go down there and get her out,
What?
Yeah. So let's go. I want to hear what Erica and Sarah have to say about this, and then I will release you guys to go enjoy the rest of your weekend.
I wholeheartedly agree with both Michelle and Robbie said, and so I think maybe the takeaway for me, or like the take home notes, right, is the one thing to not tolerate in the States is intolerance, and so that doesn't have to look like a shouting match or hostility, but, I think that on a day-to-day basis, and I am not always successful at this, but I, too much to my husband's annoyance, for example, he'll be like, oh, these fucking idiots. And blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, well, let's think about why they're saying that and why they're thinking that. And he's just like, ah! You think about it. But it is, it's kind of, we have to do that, right? We have to kind of, we may still draw the conclusion, when we go through that little like 5-second exercise in our heads, that no, that person really is an asshole, or like they're really doing a bad, like I really can't get on board with what's happening here, or even like their underlying reasons, or, my imaginations about what happened to them in their childhood, whatever, but it's like doing that pause and encouraging other people to do that too, and it's definitely not always easy to be that person. But, one of the things I did after USAID started, the kind of like the big cleaver came out and started to hack away at it. And, I have high school friends from where I'm at who, in their feeds, I see like really toxic stuff about like, oh, crybabies, like poor babies, you're gonna be fine. And like much worse than that, right? And I just kind of poked my head in there and said, you guys are being really mean. Like these people, and some of those people were just probably like, didn't care that I said that, but some people reached out to me, right? And they were like, thank you for saying something, like, this is appalling, da, 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 da. And, that's just one example. It doesn't always turn out that way in a chat, right? And maybe people would advise against going down those rabbit holes. But sometimes, whether you do that online or in real life, and, without just kind of like arguing points, just saying, why are you being so toxic, man? Like, you can disagree, but this is kind of over the line, and we need to hold each other accountable to that, whether it's our friends or our spouses or other family members and stuff like that. That's peace building at like the most micro level.
Yeah, I like it.
And I'll add that, another way to sort of look at the context right now in the United States is that it's very polarized, but what it also means is that we're in conflict already with each other. And it's so easy to point fingers at, figure out who the enemy is, because that's what they want to do. And so we really have two options ahead of us, really. It's war or peace. And if we want war, it's really easy. It's 450 million civilian guns in this country. There's a lot of tendencies for violence already for a variety of reasons. We can easily fall and head to war or peace. Peace is the other option, but peace actually means you have to be able to engage the other and be able to try to understand each other's perspective and try to figure out how to get to common ground is the only way we get to peace. And if we really want to figure out how we can make democracy work, and if we really want to be a part of the conversation on rebuilding this country, if we really want an opportunity to figure out what that new vision of this country could look like, because actually at the end of the day, this is what's happening for us, is that we now have an opportunity to actually rebuild this country in the way that actually could work for the people. Because the veil has been lifted now, right? Mm-hmm. And so if we really want that, and we really want to rebuild this country, the only direction we have is peace. And so we really have to be able to reach and extend the hand to the other person and have those difficult conversations, because we don't have any other choices beyond this at this moment.
That's well said. Well said. And it feels that stark, and I think that it is that stark. And but I want to thank you guys for coming on. This has been so great. I was looking forward to this, and it's even more fun than I thought it would be. So I'm very grateful to you. And again, it's Erica Kaster, Sara Yim, Robbie Harris, Michelle Girard. What we say here on the show, and I feel good about it now, having you guys and so much positive energy here. The way that we end the show every week is that we don't say we're going to be okay, because we don't know if we're going to be okay. What we say is, that